key aspects relevant for financial year 2021 TP compliance. Though if you go back and roll back yourself to the budget last couple of years, you will see that transfer pricing specifically, there was nothing much which has changed. It was there was nothing which was mentioned in as a change, as a drastic change, which even came in any of the presentations. What happened is, in hindsight today, I realized that the changes were not given in the budget for section 92, but the changes were done by Infosys actually. So the budget which was allocated to Infosys, they have used it for the purpose of making sure that there is a big change in transfer pricing provision when it comes to filing of the Form 3CB. Okay, so I think maybe next time in the budget I will even look for what all allocations they are doing to which all IT changes, because this is the biggest change for the current year. And when you come to financial year 2021, I think broadly the presentation is just give me a minute. Yeah. So the broad theme of the presentation is we are going to go through all the key changes which are relevant for 2021. Though technically, or let's say when you look at it from a practical side, there are no specific changes. The changes are more to do with practical aspects of filing the Form 3CB, or when you do a transfer pricing analysis, what are the key points that one needs to remember while doing the transfer pricing analysis. So with this background, I will just jump into the slide. The way I'm going to go about is that we have broken down the discussion into two. One is with respect to the Form 3CB, which is the major change for the current year. Not many people are aware that there is an online Form 3CB schema. So I have not mentioned the word agenda. If you see, it's the word schema on the presentation, and that is going to be the whole crux of our discussion for the next 45 minutes at least. And then we will follow it up with discussions on other key important aspects which are relevant for 2021, including transfer pricing analysis. So when you
sorry to disturb you. So would you like to have questions from the participants as and when you are discussing any particular point, or you would like to have at the end of, let's say, part 1 and then at the end of part 2? How would you like it?
Thanks, Rajat. Yeah, what we will do is that once I complete the Form 3CB session, we will break at that time, and I'll take a 5-minute break and take questions on any Form 3CB related thing. Post that, again, we will start with the transfer pricing documentation and other important aspects. And at the end of it, I have kept 5-10 minutes for taking open questions on this year's compliances as the case.
Perfect. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. What I'm doing is I'm just to help the bandwidth, I'm just switching off my video so that we have better bandwidth available for the discussion. Yeah. So, any year when you look at transfer pricing analysis, it typically involves the following process. There are these 9 broad steps which one has to go through. Typically, it starts with determination of the year. So we are looking at 2021 year. And when I'm saying year, it also means which year you need to consider it for the purpose of comparability. Second is broad-based analysis of transfer prices, analysis of transfer circumstances, so industry, other impacts which are there, economic impacts which are there. Third thing is understanding the FAR and selection of tested parties. So these are the 9 steps which one has to go through in every year. But what I'm going to do is, out of this, the one which I've highlighted in bold is what we are going to start off with, or we are going to discuss today. So understanding of the FAR, selection of tested party, appropriate method, how to look, what are the key methods which we need to look at, determination of making comparability adjustments, so key adjustments that one needs to keep in mind, and then ultimately interpretation and the use of data collected for determining the arm's length price, which is in the conclusion of Form 3CB. We will start with the Form 3CB because that is the most important change which has happened in 2021 right now. The Form 3CB was one of the most neglected, I'll say, items in the last few years. So now it is getting its relevant share of importance in the whole scheme of things in the current year, and I will tell you why. Quickly, when for the participants who are new to transfer pricing, when is TP applicable, or when you enter into international transaction, definitely. But when the due date gets extended, when there is a requirement to file the Form 3CB. Where the requirement to file the Form 3CB emanates from Section 92E. What it reads is every person who has entered into an international transaction or a specified domestic transaction during the previous year shall obtain a report from an accountant, etc. etc. So what happens is the most important thing for one when TP becomes applicable, or when is TP applicable, is when a person, we know what is person, I'm not getting into that, has entered into an international transaction or SGT. So this is the most important aspect. Then he has to issue a Form 3CB. Three key terminologies which one always needs to keep in mind. First is associated enterprise. Section reference is Section 92A. Applicability of threshold is one or more of the AE should be a non-resident. I'm talking about international taxation. When you look at AE, one or more of the AE should be a non-resident. Second, international transaction, Section 92B. Every even a single rupee transaction requires Form 3CB. Question is, can a 0 rupee transaction also qualify as an international transaction? The answer is definitely yes in certain circumstances. We will come to it. And the third aspect is HDT, that is specified domestic transaction, Section 92BA. The threshold has been set at 20 crores. Earlier it was 5 crores. Now for current year 2021, if your aggregate value of HDT is more than 20 crores, you still need to file a Form 3CB. So when you have TP applicable, what are the two things that one needs to do? One is file the Form 3CB, of course. And second is the transfer pricing study report. Whether you have to prepare it only when it is more than 1 crore, that is 10 million, is something which is a debatable thing, but we will not get into it. You need to prepare a transfer pricing study report irrespective, because you need to defend your transfer pricing mechanism before the tax authorities or before tax authorities, of course, but even to establish which is the ideal method, you need to have a transfer pricing study report in place. TP applicable, now what are the due dates? And I'm talking about financial year 2021. So taxpayer must compute the arm's length price. You know, the first slide which we discussed had the details, the process in which you will compute the arm's length price. It involves various aspects which we will go through one by one. Burden of proof is on the taxpayer to establish the arm's length price and to maintain documentation. So remember, this first thing is that the assessee has to prepare the transfer pricing documentation, the transfer pricing analysis, and then only then it will be submitted to the tax authorities, and then they will take their views. For the current year, the due dates, the key due dates for the current year are there on the screen. So the Form 3CB deadline remains January 31, 2022 for the current year. Tax audit remains January 15, 2022. So there is a bit of an anomaly, or I'm not sure how will you resolve this issue, but in the tax audit, one has to report in clause 30 if the assessee has done any kind of a primary adjustment or in the previous year, and then the consequent repercussions from secondary adjustment. So just a hypothetical situation for the current year is that if you are going to decide about someone's transfer pricing analysis on 31st of January, then you know how will you report that on, in the tax audit report which will be filed on January 15th. I know that there are going to be points with respect to, let's say, the financials is anyway going to be end of December, etc. But nonetheless, I would have thought that, you know, you would have had both these deadlines in sync, so that tomorrow, for whatever reason, if the financials are extended by taking approval, etc., then these two deadlines would have been in sync, and you would have been able to link both the things. So in the tax audit report, you would have disclosed the secondary or the primary adjustment also. Tax audit report, tax return, of course, this where TP is applicable remains February 28. Though this is not directly linked, but there is something which is designation of master file. So where you have got more than one associated enterprises in India, which is resident in India, you can designate one entity to file the master file compliances in India. The due date for that is January 29, 2022. Master file in Form 3CE-AA, that is the actual filing of master file. So if the designated entity, or if you have only one entity, then that entity will have to file the master file rated compliance, that is Form 3CE-AA, by February 28, 2022. Similarly, there is a safe harbor, that is Form 3CE-SA. I'm not very sure about it, but if it is extended, the due date remains again February 28, 2022 for the current year. So these are certain key due dates for the current year, that is for financial year 2021 compliance, where TP is applicable. I have not covered situations where TP is not applicable because that is not the topic for our discussion today. Diving into the Form 3CB, the overall schema of Form 3CB remains the same as last year. There is no broad change in the schema. So there is a Form 3CB. It has primarily two sections. One is the report and the annexures. Annexures are again broken down into Part A, Part B, and Part C. The clauses remain the same broadly. So there is nothing which has changed in the Form 3CB per se. What has changed is the way the Form 3CB looks and feels. I will not get into how it looks and feels right now, but this is the overall report which it will look in the PDF format when it is there. So this is the I know it's a glimpse of the report, the way it will look right now. I will quickly run past every clause, and then what we will do is we will get into the practical side. That is, actually we will go and run a live Form 3CB. So what are the issues? I'll explain you practically, because it is not possible for me to explain the issues here over a PPT. So I'll take you through the clauses right now. This is the report of the certificate, the way it will look. Any kind of observations, remarks, there is a space for that. This is Part A, which is a general. It remains the same name of the AE address. A lot of these fields get auto-populated from the system. I'll take you through those sections when we go through the live Form 3CB. These are the clauses. We are in Part B, international transaction. The clauses remain the same. That is, clause 10 deals with the associated enterprises. The details required, name, relationship, there is no change in the clause. So the same details are required. Clause 11A and 11B. 11A deals with tangible goods, that is purchase, sale of raw material, consumables, or any other supplies for assembling, processing, or manufacturing. So again, I'm not going to really get into what should be reported in 11A and 11B, because that is something which is not changed from the last year. So whatever you were doing last year will continue in the current year. However, what has changed in the current year are three or four items which I've highlighted on your screen in bold. One is there is a change in the way the address is reported right now. Second thing, there is a requirement which has come up, which is you need to the type of unique identification number. So for your associated enterprise in clause 11A and 11B, or all the clauses, you need to now mention either the PAN, that is the Indian PAN details. Second is the tax identification number, that is the tax, their respective PAN in their respective country. So whatever is the tax, the identification number the AE has in their respective country is what you need to mention in this clause. And they have thankfully provided something known as other. So giving you example, in certain countries you may not have a tax identification number, but you may have a VAT. So giving you example, in something like a Dubai or UAE, I mean, in UAE you don't have tax laws applicable. They will be having VAT laws, so they can even provide the VAT identification number in this situation. Also in quantity and unit, they have made certain changes. So one, I'll take you through the changes. One is the address. If your AE is having an Indian address, like giving you example, the AE is a Indian branch of a foreign entity. They will have a PAN in India. In that situation, if you insert the PIN code, the other address gets auto-populated. So that is something which I will show you when we get into the practical side of Form 3CB. For foreign entities, of course, there is no auto-population. You can write anything there. Second is identification number, which we discussed some time back. And third is quantity. They have come up with specific units. In last year's Form 3CB, there was nothing which was mentioned there, but now they have come up with various units, quantities, meters, square kilometers, units, etc. So they have changed that for the current year while disclosing. The rest of the requirements remain the same. 11C. So as I mentioned, you can run past these clauses a little bit later on. 11C deals with purchase or sale of any other tangible goods. So typically in 11C, you will have transactions pertaining to capital good purchases, which are not directly covered in 11A and 11B. So but these are 11C captures all the transactions which are not covered in 11A and 11B, but which are pertaining to tangible goods. So normally what we have seen is companies are reporting the purchase or sale of fixed assets in this clause. The next requirement is clause number 12, which is to deal with intangible property, purchase, sale, transfer, lease, use, intangible of such know-how, patent, copyright, etc. So the details are same as clause 11C. So I have not again reiterated everything. What comes in clause 12 is typically the know-how, royalty payment, any kind of payments towards brand usage, trademark, all will come as reporting requirement in clause 12. Inbound, outbound. Inbound is where the foreign entity is charging India, and outbound situations is where, example, the Infosys of the world, where we are going to charge the foreign entities for such kind of charges, whether to do with brand, technology, royalty. Clause 13 is to do with services availed or provided. Simple as that. The clause remains the same as last year. The changes are the same as last year. That is the ones which are highlighted in the table above. They same carry forward for clause 13. That is the address and the unique identification number. Clause 14 is to do with lending or borrowing of money. So any kind of advance payment, loan, convertible preference shares, convertible instruments, debt instruments will be classified in clause 14. Again here the changes are the same as other clauses, that is the address and the unique identification number. Similarly, in guarantee, clause 15 is to do with guarantee, where you have either provided or received guarantee. Remember here that typically you will not find the guarantee disclosures in the related party schedule, specifically if the foreign AE has not charged you any guarantee fee. So example, if tomorrow Microsoft US were to provide guarantee to the banker in India for Microsoft India, Microsoft US were to provide guarantee to the banker of Microsoft India, it will not be normally disclosed in the related party schedule of an entity which is not an Ind AS, a normal entity. You will find these details normally in the unsecured loan or in the loan section where they will be disclosed by way of a note. So you'll have to pick up these things from the note. And if they have not charged anything, definitely in clause 15 you need to report it as zero value transaction. The only question is whether you put it as a zero value transaction or you just give it as a note. It's something which is left to your discretion in the current year. Marketable security, purchase and sale of marketable securities. So clause 16 is to do with any kind of equity or is to do with shares. So any kind of shares that you have purchased or has been invested in your company. So example, foreign entities invest in your shares, you will report it in clause 16. Vice versa, if Indian companies who are going abroad and investing in shares abroad, you will report that in clause 16. Clause 17 is to do with mutual agreement proceedings. These are all cost-related allocations. So any kind of costs which are allocated and then charged to India, or vice versa, India is allocating charges, costs and providing the services outside India, they will come in the clause 17. Clause 18 is to do with business restructuring. Example, there is a change in your characterization. I will come to what the term characterization means. But if there is any kind of change in your characterization, change of remuneration, change in shareholding because of change in the overall group structure, that will be part of your business restructuring of business organization. So typically, if you have zero value transactions during the year, but only you have you have just been restructured during the year, your share in the group, then still you will need to report it in clause 18 and form 3CB becomes applicable to you. Clause 19 is any other transaction having a bearing on profit, income, losses, or assets. So anything which is not really covered on top from clause number 11A to clause number 18 will get covered in clause 19. Clause 20 is got deemed international transactions. So naturally these are not transactions with your AE, but because of your AE, I am not really getting into what a deemed international transaction is, but for the larger public, what a deemed international transaction means, I'll just quickly spend a minute on that. That where the Indian entity has had a prior agreement signed with a group entity, that is with the associated enterprise, where the transaction actually happens with a third party. So the terms of a third party are actually determined by your group entity with the prior agreement. Then the third party for the purpose of transfer pricing becomes, it doesn't become a deemed AE, it becomes the transaction with the third party becomes a deemed international transaction. So remember here, you're doing a transaction with a third party. The third party can be in India, outside India. It could be in India as well as outside India. But the terms of this transaction between the Indian entity and such third party are determined by your associated enterprise by way of a prior agreement. In this situation, it will qualify as a deemed international transaction. Again, the AE, the third party doesn't become your AE, only the transaction becomes a deemed international transaction. So overall, in clause B, insertion of an/10 from AE is a new requirement in all clauses of part B. Now the only question is whether the new change in Form 3 CB requirement needs to be notified in Form 3 by the CBDT. My view is yes, because even right now, if you go to the form, this requirement is still not there. At least what I could see till day before yesterday, it was not there notified by way of any kind of circular. We still have the old Form 3 CB available in physical format in the on the web. Part C deals with HDD. The only change in HDD in clause 21 is that the Aadhaar of AE and the address of the AE is something which has been requested. Now Aadhaar will be naturally applicable only for certain type of AE. Thankfully, it is not a compulsory field, so you can only maybe in certain individuals or persons who are individuals, you will be able to use that Aadhaar in such situations. Clause 22 A, B, again it is with respect to inter-unit transfer of eligible business. Eligible business section 80A, 6, 80IA, or 10AA. So these are inter-unit transfer. So the difference between 22A and 22B is one is transferred any goods, and in case of 22B it is acquired any goods or services. The disclosure requirements remain the same vis-a-vis the last year. 23 is got to do with not unit transfer, but this is business transfer. So between a business and an entity which is under 80I 10 or section 10AA, the requirements again remain the same during the current year. 24, the clause even was there in the last year, that is any transaction person into it is with respect to 115 BAB. We will not really get into the transaction specifically here. The only catch which is always there in clause 23, 24 is that what it says is that any business transacted which has resulted in more than ordinary profit to an eligible business to which this section applies, or which, in 24 it talks about a person referred to in section 115B which has resulted in more than ordinary profits for that business. So, the question which always comes to my mind is whether we need to report in the Form 3CB only when it has resulted in more than ordinary profit, or you need to report the transaction irrespective. There is this, it takes me back to that Golmaal series, and there is this Mithun Chakravarti's famous dialogue, offer hai to ha, agar inquiry hai to na, something like that it is there. So I don't know what is to be put here, that confuses me. Of course, Institute has provided some guidance here. So the way we have been following the practice here is that we are only reporting the transactions where that it has resulted in more than ordinary profit with appropriate disclosure in the observation section. And this is the final verification section of the Form 3CB. Okay, so what I will do is at this moment I will pause and I will go through the practical side of Form 3CB, and again we'll return to the slides a little bit later. What I have done is we will go through the practical Form 3CB right now. Okay, what I've done is there is this assessee which is already there on your screen. Maybe you can see it. We will start filing this assessee Form 3CB. So remember this year that before you start filing the process, right now I've already logged into it. We have already logged in this assessee's profile. Remember, first thing, before starting the form CCB, update the profile of the assessee. So on this side, you will go here, there is my profile. Make sure that the profile of the assessee is updated. Now, if you are the assessee on this call, definitely you can do it. But if you are the consultant on this call, you will have to request your assessee to make sure that their profile is updated. And when I say their profile, key things which are important is their address, the authorized representative, stroke the director. These are and their mobile numbers. These are certain key fields which need to be updated on their field so that there is no issue in form CCB. And why is this important? Is that typically if you start the form CCB process without updating the field, the profile of the assessee, and then subsequently you update the profile, it renders the form 3CB useless. You know, the name of, when you go subsequently to the form 3CB, you will see that ideally the name of either the director of the company or the CA comes in the form 3CB, but the name of the assessee doesn't come. So this is a very important aspect which you need to keep in mind for the current year's form 3CB, that first update the profile and only then you can start with the form 3CB process. So that can be done by going to my CA, by going in my profile, updated. Next is you go to my chartered accountant. Here you go to the assign form, you do add form, select the form from the drop down list, select the assessment here, original or revised. So they have given us both the options. Of course, you'll start with original, you'll add that details here, and then you'll do submit. I've already done this step for us, so I will not repeat it. Once you hit submit, you can check come to view assigned forms, and you can check the form 3CB has been assigned here. A very important step which I would want to mention to you is that, remember, once you go to the form 3CB in the assessee section, in the let's say in the authorized representative part, the assessee can withdraw the form 3CB anytime by clicking on this withdraw button here. You will need to remember this because there are a lot of errors which come in the form 3CB. In that case, you have to start with the process all over again. In that case, you will have to ask the assessee to come to this section here, withdraw the form, and then again he'll have to notify you and start with the process again. So that is something which you need to remember in the assessee's login. So now already a notification has gone for the assessee. Our assessee here is PTDA consultant. Now let's go into the PA's login and start filing the form. Yeah. Okay, so once you come to the CA's login, what you will see is you have to go to pending actions here. In that, you will see the name of the client which will appear here. So here you will see that there is a request which has come from the assessee. You will accept it. Let's say in this case you accepted it. It will create this link here. You go to back to work list. The same assessee, you can start filing the form 3CB process here. If you want to file for any other assessee, being a consultant, you will see you have to hit view all. The moment you view all these 20 lists will be there in front of you, and then you start with the process at that time. So far so good. You know, as you said that so far I think this is the easiest step, and from now all the steps are a bit something which you need to remember and understand a little bit in detail. These are the same sections that we discussed in the PPT, part A, part B, part C, and verification. So let's go with part A. As I said, the profile is updated, therefore the name of the assessee is coming properly here, address is coming, their PAN is coming. You just select the nature of the business of the assessee. So you go to the drop down, select that. The moment you hit a click here, below this box, you will see that the assessee business is picked up here. Assume for a moment they are into other business, let's say in R&D also. I'm just taking something randomly here. That second field will also get auto-populated. The rest of the fields are all auto-populated. Status of the assessee, year, assessment year, aggregate value for SGD as well as international. You do save. I think this is the simplest step here. But this step will only work. Remember this step will only work if the profile of the assessee is updated. If the profile of the assessee is not updated, please don't start with the form 3CB. So example, when you go here, if you see your name, the name of the director, etc., you'll have to ask the assessee to withdraw the form 3CB, update the profile, and then come back. That is the steps which you'll have to do. Then you start with the form 3CB. So another thing which is important, we'll start with the section B, which is then this year the form 3CB is an online form 3CB as of now. Important thing is I'm doing this on December 18th. My research was till December 17th. So anything which will come after yesterday night, I am not really privy to that right now. So if any utility comes, of course, we will have another session on that. But right now, whatever is available on their website, we will go through it. The online form 3CB, filing the details of list of associated enterprises. So they have given something known as a CSV. So there are two ways in which you can upload data in this year's form 3CB. One is directly by adding details here. So example, you just add the details here. You select the relationship. The relationship can be from the one of the drop-down lists which are provided here. I'm not getting into how and what is relevant, but for 2 minutes I'll spend the first one, which is one enterprise holds directly or indirectly shares carrying not less than 26%. So this is clause A and this is clause B. In 90% of the clients, these two clauses will be applicable. Clause A, which is one enterprise holds directly, this is a horizontal clause. A vertical clause. Vertical clause is a grandfather, father, son relationship. So it comes from top down. It is not a sibling relationship. So example, Microsoft holding into Microsoft India is a top-down relationship. It's a vertical relationship. So clause A is all vertical relationship. Clause B, which is any person or enterprise holds indirectly, is a horizontal relationship. So example, if Microsoft US is holding Microsoft India and it is also holding Microsoft Singapore, so Microsoft Singapore becomes my vertical relationship, that is my sibling relationship. So this is something which is important from a form 3CB perspective, the difference between the clause A and clause B. You just write a description of the assessee. Just do add. So this is one way in which you can add the data for the current year. But assume for a moment you have got bulk data, that is you have got 15 or 16 AEs during the year. Then how do you add that? So in such situation, what you would be doing is first you will download the CSV file. And then here you can just input the data that you want to fill. And then save this file. Okay. What you do next is after you upload that, you just come and upload the CSV here. When you upload the CSV file, what I've done is, for the sake of our discussion, I've already kept some dummy CSV files ready. Clause 10 is what I'm uploading, which is the associated enterprises clause. So as you will see, when I did upload CSV, what I added by doing physically add details, that number has gone away from me. So remember that either you do add details or you do CSV uploading. So you cannot do both. Either you have to add the details only by way of CSV, or you have to add physically by adding this. Alternatively, of course, after adding the CSV file, there could be another option now, is I can add the fourth line item by adding CSV. But remember, CSV will undo the earlier upload, whatever you have done. You will see that right now there are 3 errors which have come. Please remember one thing, based on my experience, I'm telling you, there are these 3 errors. Don't hit this show error. It doesn't make any difference. The moment you hit that show error, it will just change to, right now I can show you for the moment, view all. But then these three tabs you will see have become redundant, and it has its own consequences subsequently. So remember, don't hit that. Just keep it in this mode itself, which is show error. The errors are mentioned here, but you cannot see. But what you have to do is go and edit every line item for the current year. You will see that this drop down menu has not been picked up. So now I will define the relationship here for all these three. And then I will save it. You will see that that error has gone away. Sorry, that error has gone away on top now, and we are good to go. This is by saving. But what everybody should do is that once this is uploaded, export this as a CSV so that this remains as a backup. I will just show you the problem with the current year's form 3CB. For the moment, I've exported the CSV. I'm just deleting all the three line items, and I am going to just upload the same CSV that I just downloaded from the system. And you will see again the same errors come. It doesn't pick up the relationship. So remember that again you have to go auto populate, put the AE details, save. So this is something which you need to remember for the current year, at least as of now. And then you can save it. Also, another thing based on my experience, don't leave a clause with error. Once you start filing a clause, make sure you complete it and then only proceed. Next, let's say we go to clause 11AB. Here, I'm just saying no for the moment. I'm just saying yes because I've done some kind of dummy file for this year. I'll just upload that file here. Again, you will see that there are errors here. So the address has been picked up here right now. You will see that some of the but what has not come is the units quantity here. Secondly, the method has not come here, and that is the most important thing. So anywhere you have to now edit. There is no other way you can edit this. You go here, you hit edit, and then you have to verify the details. First thing, it has not picked up the unique identification number, though it is there in my file, in the CSV file. So you hit the unique identification number, you have PAN, TAN and others. You will say, let's say you get the TAN of the other entity, you will write tax identification number. Here the address, though it is pre-filled here, you will realize that this is still in India. The moment I change it from India to any other country, the rest of the fields go blank. So anyways, filling the CSV file is of no use right now. You have to come here and change the address. You can copy paste it, of course. I am right now just for sake of speed, I am just keeping it, I'm just typing certain random number. And all these fields are compulsory. Capital goods purchase of transaction, units, you can write various here. Example, if you don't know the units, you can write various here. If you know the units, you can just input that number here. Paid, payable, received, receivable, you have to just mention that. And then you can select the method. Any observations you want to write, you can write here. Then just do save. So this line items get saved here. You can just check now everything has come properly. So here if you see the difference between this and this, the country has come, there is no country here. That was something which we auto-populated, we edited. The tax identification number we inserted right now. For sake of example, I'll take another line item. You don't have the details of PAN or TAN, you write other. This is something which is not recommended, but ideally you should ask your clients to get the TAN number, TIN number, I'm sorry. Once you get the TIN number of the client from the respective countries, you can insert that. But if, let's say you are on 25th of January and you need to still file the form 3CB, there is nothing else available. What I can suggest is you can write others here. You can write any other indicator which has come from their invoice. Or you can actually just write description, I am name of the AE, and just write the name of the AE again. This is just a last minute thing which I am giving you as a suggestion. Ideally, you should use either the PAN or TIN number as is available. If it is not available, then you can write other name of the E, because that is the only thing which is available with you as of now. And then of course you do the other things auto-populate here. Remember here, if this is India, it will not accept anything else here. Like giving you example, I'm trying to write A here, it is not going to accept because our India pin code is defined in numerical terms. So for the moment, let me just type this. It is going to pick up everything except for the post office, which I need to select. Rest of the things get auto-populated here. So if I have to write the complete address, the only space where I can write this is here in flat oblique building, and rest will get auto-populated. This is only for the Indian AE. So it will come in two situations, either in a permanent establishment in India or a branch of a foreign entity in India. These are the two places where you will have to write India, and then you will have to auto-populate these things. For sake of, I just delete this line item. Save. Intangible, I'll say no for the moment. Remember one thing, based on my experience, the next thing is don't start with clause 13. Do the clause 13 at the fag end, because there are a lot of errors in clause 13. So you go to other clauses, complete those clauses. Right now, I just complete it for the sake of example. The process of filing every clause remains the same. So I'm not really getting into it. The moment I say yes, you will have those three options. Either CSV can be uploaded or whichever way you look at it. Why? The moment all these clauses are filled, you will see save. You can just save this. That means your clause A and clause B is filled. Same thing I will do for this completes the part. Now we'll go to verification quickly, and then I'll just select yes. Let's say have been. There is this section here in where you can add comments, add details here. If you want to add here about any qualification, etc., you can add those qualification notes here. We can even write the UDIN number here in case you want to give it in the form CCV. You can mention here, generate and add it here. And then the firm registration number. So you will see that there are these drop down because I have been using this firm registration. The moment I hit this drop down, there is a box created. So this creates errors later on. So don't select any options from the drop down. So please type it manually. Otherwise, it will create errors later on. And then do save. Now you will see that there is this preview button which has got activated. Earlier, this button was not activated. The moment I hit preview, I can go ahead and generate the forms CCV and go into the next step. But I wanted to tell you one thing. There is clause 13, which there are errors in clause 13, which I just wanted to highlight to you. Right now, when you go to clause 13, and that's the reason why I filled the other form. In clause 13, the moment I say yes, and let's say I just upload CSV file right now, which I've got, and I have two types of CSVs. One is for provided services, which I'll add here. So for the sake of example, I will delete two line items, and this line item I will just edit it quickly. Okay, so now clause 13, so far so good. I have added this and I'll save it. I'll come out of this and I'll save it. You will see the preview button is still existing. And now little bit of horror story for all of us. Let's go to clause 13. And now the same line item is not provided, but I'll just edit it and I'll just change one thing. I'll change it to avail. This is paid. This automatically becomes paid once you do this avail. And then I'll save it. And do save it. Now you will see it's not moving ahead itself. There is no option given to me to go ahead. It's at a standstill. I cannot do anything about this form 3CB now. You will say, oh, why don't you go and change it? There is this error in the form 3CB. I cannot do. I'll cancel it. Nothing will happen. There is no way I can do anything about this form 3CB. And now is the most important thing. What we should do next? Don't go and do anything else. Straightforward. Come to the dashboard. Come to the pending action points. Start again with the view filing here. You will see there. Start with the process again. Let's get started. Luckily, you will see all the information is still there. And this is because we have started with clause 13 at the end. If I would have started with clause 13 beginning, all the other information gets lost. So remember, you start with clause 13 at the end of it. You come here, you will see in clause 13, it has changed. It has its own mind. It would have changed it to provided to it. Okay. It has its own mind. I don't know why, but it has changed it on its own. It has not saved my availing of E. And then you have, there is no way you can change it right now. Go back. You can do it by edit, but again, the moment you do that, it will result in an error. So right now in clause 13, if your form 3CB has, your asset E has got any transaction of availing of service, you cannot fill it in the form 3CB. So, okay, so this is what we have done right now. Then we will preview it now. And you will see in the preview right now, these are the options which are available here. The form is okay here. You will not see any major errors here or any problem. You will see that there are abbreviations which are come here. There is the entire thing, A or B, as I explained you earlier, that comes. Similarly, in clause 13, 12, whatever we have mentioned, everything comes here. What you should do is quickly then download the form 3CB. This will take a couple of minutes, but in the meanwhile, I'll explain you the other things which are important that are don't. Towards the end of this button, there is this back. Don't press this back button again. These are all danger buttons which I don't know why they have put there. The moment you hit back, the entire form 3CB in certain situations becomes redundant. Never press this back button. If you want to go back again and check what is the issue, come back here and do edit. It will take you back to that section. But don't hit back. Even going forward, there is this back or cancel here. Never hit this button. It always creates errors in the form 3CB, and then you'll have to start over the form 3CB process again. You will see the form 3CB has been downloaded. I'll quickly open it. For some reason, there is error. Yeah. So this form 3CB which we generated is downloaded. Yeah, all looks good, except for a couple of things which we need to be aware of. If you go to clause 13, you will see, clause 13, there is an error here in the reporting. You will see amount as per books is gone, shifted columns here. And the method, instead of method, is the amount, and in the method has gone in observations. And if you have mentioned any observations, they are not there in the form 3CB as of now. The rest of the transactions are broadly in place, but again, in the PDF generation, a lot of times, like giving you an example in clause 19, there is this quantity of the unit, but these questions are not there when you start filing the CSV file or you start filing the physical form 3CB, you will not see this. I'll take you through that example maybe quickly. So if you go to clause 19, sorry. When you do add details, the quantity details are not asked anywhere here. But in the PDF, they have been asking those quantity details. I don't know from where it comes. Anyways, we will leave that. And so these are the practical aspects with respect to form 3CB, which I've explained. Remember a couple of things. If there is an error, don't do anything with that error on the top. So if once you do yes, sometimes there is an error which will appear here after uploading the CSV file. Don't do anything about that error. That is very important. Use the save button as much as possible in your case. Second thing is, there is another way in the CA login you can access those files. So I'll just take you the example. When you go to the pending actions, there is work list. In the work list, you can see all these forms. So example, the form which we are filing is there right now. You can see all the other forms when I hit view. I'm not hitting it for the sake of security. File, form. If I go from here and I do continue, you will see this is a blank form sometimes. Right now, luckily it's come, but it has its own mind. Sometimes it will give the data, it will not give the data. And this has got something to do with clause 13. So if you have mentioned availed of services, this will come blank. So remember, always go to the dashboard, start the form receiving from pending actions, view work list, and from here start the thing. Don't use this option which is pending action work list, though, and then start from there, the resume button. Don't use that for the purpose of transferring. There is another way you can start the work. This is in e-file income tax file form. This is also a place you will see that the same assessee is appearing here. If I do resume here, if I come here, you will see this is a blank form right now for the same client, and it is taking the name of the assessee here. So never go from income tax file, income tax form. You will see that this is still under preparation. Always you have to use either work list, or the best way is go to dashboard, pending action. From here, you start the file, go here, hit the button here, and then you will see all the information is well intact. Only thing is, you will remember, once you come here, you will see that the preview button is deactivated. It happens quite a lot of times. What you should do is go to part C, just go to other transactions, just hit the same no button, save, come out, do save, and then you will see that the preview button is activated. Then you can go ahead and do it. So these are certain aspects which I have learned over the past few days. These are the errors which is there. Clause 13 is to be filled last. So I think with this, I will quickly go back to my presentation. Yeah. So summary of key changes to the form filing process. The use of XML has been done away in the current year. We have got only the online form PCB as of now. The facility to do bulk uploading various data of each clause and facility is been done away with. You have to download a CSV file and update it and upload it. As of now, it is with errors. Import of earlier year's data or pre-fill option is not available in the current year's Form 3CEB. So if you have last year's Form 3CEB XML file, well, you will have to copy paste from the PDF or use some different technology to get it done. Part B of the Form 3CEB, all clauses need either the PAN, TAN, that is what we saw. Changes is the CA has now the right to accept the Form 3CEB. Until last year, there was no question of accepting. If you get any incorrect request, you can reject them as well. The taxpayer can withdraw the form anytime. So if there are any errors in the Form 3CEB, I have shown you at the beginning that you can withdraw those forms. I have summarized the filing process. This PPT will anyway come to you. You can use this for the process of identifying how to go around doing the e-filing process. We have gone through most of these errors already, but quickly I'll take you through. The CSV files are not getting imported entirely. Lots of work needs to be done by the taxpayer. So even after uploading the CSV file, you will see that in lot of places you have to write the address, you'll have to write the type of service, etc. No drop-down option is currently provided in the CSV. I'm sure and we have already mentioned all these points to Infosys over a specific call. I'm sure they are working on it. Clause 13 is not accepting transactions pertaining to availing of services. So if you have availing of services right now, you can just upload the Form 3CEB by mentioning it as provided services, and then later on, whenever the schema gets activated, you can change it back. After uploading the data into various clauses of Form 3CEB, certain clauses are not accepting data appropriately. Example, in clause 13, I showed you there is a mismatch in the column in the PDF as well as the Form 3CEB. Even though there is no availing of services, you have done provided of services, but there is a mismatch. When you upload the Form 3CEB and file it, the client will usually come back and say that there is an error, but whether the error is actually in the form or it's only in the PDF, we don't know. So right now we are recommending that we just hold on to the Form 3CEB until it is resolved in the PDF format. Data has been uploaded, gets randomly lost. Yeah, so this is something which you need to be worried about. Right now, luckily, it didn't get lost, but that is because, we followed a lot of practices which I told you. But if you do some errors, it gets lost. So if you do back, cancel, the data will just get lost and you'll have to start doing the process all over again. So issues on the online portal, I have given the date. XML file doesn't get converted. There is a problem with the UDIN. You generate the UDIN, it is not getting immediately recognized on the website. It takes a couple of days to get recognized. Right now, after uploading the Form 3CB and filing the Form 3CB, the address of the CA gets replaced with the address of the assessee. This query has been resolved yesterday by Infosys, is what they have sent us a mail. I am hoping they have done this change. The uploaded file PDF, one important thing is the file which is there right now, which I showed you PDF, and the file which is uploaded, they don't look any different. So remember that you download the acknowledgement for all the Form 3CBs, because that is the only proof you have that it is a file Form 3CB. Otherwise, the form looks and feels the same, which is preloaded, the one which we downloaded just now, and after uploading, it just feels the same. There is no digital signature, etc. on that file. Yeah, and the other thing is, once you upload a Form 3CB, it just disappears from the CA login. We have highlighted that they are working on it. The Form 3CB will only appear in the taxpayer login. They are working on it so that it will reflect in the CA login as well. Some do's and don'ts. First thing for the taxpayer is updating the taxpayer's profile. Don't start the Form 3CB without updating their profile. Very, very important. Second, for the CAs, these are certain key points. After uploading the data, ensure that every clause is downloaded in the CSV. The CSV will be useful for filing the Form 3CB again in case the data is lost, or in a situation next year you can again copy paste the data, because most likely they're not going forward. This is the way forward. They will be using a CSV to upload bulk data. Avoid the use of cancel back button, which is there at the end of every page. Save as much as possible wherever you can. Go to the clause and save to the extent possible so that it gets uploaded. Try to fill every clause without error. That is, you go, once you start filing a clause, whether you're starting clause 11, 11A, 11B, whatever, complete that form without errors, and then only you save that data and set out. Sometimes if you leave the form midway by filing it, then it is going to cause you error. And then process the UDIN. As of today, at least you'll have to process the UDIN 2 or 3 days before filing the Form 3CB if you want to do it at the same time, or else the site of course provides you with the option of filing it without UDIN, but I leave it to you how you would want to do it. Yeah, so with that, I think we complete the Form 3CB. I'll take a 2-minute break here and check whether you people have any queries at this time on the Form 3CB before I proceed with the other section.
Hello, Tejas, Sunil here.
Yeah.
Did you face any problem in clause number 14? Because in the earlier XML, there were issues that when we used to fill the XML, some data used to get lost. So, is there any?
There was an error, Sunil, which was there prior to December 3rd. If you started the Form 3CB before December 3rd and you are filing clause 14, then this error will appear where a lot of data in clause 14 is getting lost, or interest rates are not appearing properly, or a lot of similar things are happening. So what we have done in one of our clients is we went and withdrew the Form 3CB and started so Infosys has mailed us that they have rectified this form. Post that, we withdrew the Form 3CB and started the process again. And then when we started the process again, this clause 14 is now working seamlessly.
Okay, fine. So just one point, I think in the WebEx call, we had also mentioned, that we had filed the form and we wanted the client to reject the form, but the client could not accept or reject the form. Recently, the client could reject the form. So probably Infosys is really working on it.
Yeah. So there are two things, one is that the CA can himself withdraw the form, or the assessee can go and withdraw it from his own login. So there are 2 or 3 places where he can withdraw from his own login. One is from income tax filed forms and one is from assigned CA. It is always advisable to go to the assigned CA and withdraw the form. That is more logical way of withdrawing the form rather than going to the filled form, because a lot of times, we have seen that even the CAs are rejecting the form and it is creating a mismatch in their system. So always go ask the client to go to once the CA uploads the form, ask the client to go to the assigned CA section in the name of the CA, you will see assigned forms. In that, go to the respective form and withdraw.
Just one observation, I think, I don't know if you have had any other WebEx call with Infosys, but in the call which we had, I forgot to tell them, that the Form 3CB annexure is ideally the responsibility of the client to prepare. But by giving this online utility, they are, making the CA prepare everything. So it's just not typing, it goes through only through the CA's login that we can fill all details. So it's not that somebody gives you and you just upload. So it's all being prepared by the CA and then the CA is giving the audit report. So that anomaly, I think they should have solved. It should have happened through the client login. But I don't know.
I think the way I look at it is right now, giving this kind of education to clients would be dangerous. So at least right now, what we are doing is we are asking the clients to give us the data in Excel format, and then uploading, copy pasting it by doing VLOOKUP, etc. into the CSV files and uploading it from our end. Though I know that where you are coming from, but this year that's going to be a practical challenge, that you will have to get the data from client in Excel, use it to convert it to CSV and then upload it. And of course, the CSV files themselves need to be changed because the drop down, etc. need to work seamlessly. As of now, there are a lot of errors in the CSV files.
Just one information, have you been able to file any form?
Yeah, we have filed 3 or 4 forms where we didn't have clause 13 involved. We have filed 3 or 4 forms. The forms have gone well in other sections. There is no other errors which have come.
But only in the case probably it is where the services are rendered to the assessor.
Yeah. Only in clause 13 there is an error right now. Specifically in clause 13 also availing of services. And clause 13 there is a display error. I don't know whether it's a display error or what. I don't know, but that is the only error. But apart from that, other clients where we don't have clause 13, we have been able to file forms.
Okay.
As Tejas has rightly explained, all the intricacies of Form 3CB, filing available only online mode, at least till date. And let's wait for the offline utility. If it comes, it would be a boon for us. Otherwise, we have to continue with this disaster, whatever it may be. So let's continue with the other intricacies which are special for FY 2021, which has got its impact naturally due to the special event which we had in the, just give me a second, which we had during the start of FY 2021. And no one can forget this deadly announcement by the government on the evening of 24th March 2020, which came with the lockdown of first 21 days initially and then almost continued till the end of the May. So the nationwide lockdown due to the COVID-19 impact, which was seen globally at the start of January 19 and then continued till date with its new variants day by day. So we all know that first wave of COVID-19 came globally. It has been spread, and at the right time, our government has announced the countrywide lockdown on 2020 at the fag end of March 2020. And we all know that we suffered the travel restrictions, strict quarantine rules, various social distancing norms, which made its own impact on various sectors such as health, economic affairs, financial hardship for various people at various sectors. And we could see the hardship people could go through the migration things, caught up at home, working day and night. And it has got its huge impact on the Indian economy overall, disrupted the business operations, changed the scale of business operation on its own, globally as well as in the Indian terms of it. And it not only continued during 2020, but then again the second wave came in 2021, and the state-wise lockdown declared by the state governments, and again some kind of impact it could have on the current financial year as well. But as we could see, that serious financial or economic impact was not there in FY 1920 because the lockdown initially came at the end of March 2020. but it has got its huge impact during FY 2021, and that makes it special because from overall all point of view, the FY 2021 was a miserable year for the business operations on the personal front for various people. And we can see in terms of the commercial sector, we can see the impact on different industries. We have highlighted here in the red the industries which have got negatively impacted, such as automotive industry was there, travel and tourism was there, real estate got impacted badly. But then there was some positive impact also in some industries such as pharma, FMCG, because though the demand and supply got disrupted at some sectors, it has got also shifted to some other sectors, like people were working from home. So the goods and things were consumed at home, the demand got increased for those things. Technology-based industries got its own share of boon in all this schema, because work from home thing made us the technology use efficient, and again we cannot forget the media aspect of it. Then when we could try to reconfirm our statistics of impact on the various industrial sectors, just yesterday we could gauge some data from Proves, so that to understand what we are saying, the positive impact or a negative impact in various industries, whether through the financial numbers also it is giving the same results or not. But yes, then it is giving the same results. As you can see in the table, we have highlighted here the hotel and tourism industry. Out of the companies for which data was available for FY 2021 especially, the operating profitability trend we have studied for FY 2021, and we compared it vis-a-vis FY 19-20. Then we could see that 94% of the companies' profits were dropped during FY 2021 because of this COVID impact. Again, the automobile sector, the impact was similar negative impact almost to the 69% cases. Banking and finance industry was somewhat at neutral pace, because we could see that during the lockdown restrictions also, people used to go to banks were working seamlessly. So it was a kind of neutral impact on the banking and finance industry. Again, IT and ITS industry and the pharmaceuticals industry has a good impact with the 54% and 70% of the share of the profitability, which it could increase over the financial year 19-20. So some industries got impacted positively, some got negatively. Now we have to understand what all this has a relation with our today's topic, that is TP. Okay, the business operations got shifted, got changed, got disturbed, got boomed. But then how to correlate with the TP analysis? So industry specific impact, what has happened is it changed the equations of demand and supply globally. And since it is the globalization era we are present in, or we are working in, the global impact naturally made an impact on the Indian side of it as well, because multinational enterprises are there present worldwide. One side of it gets impacted naturally, the other side has its own share of getting a positive or negative impact the way it needs. So shifting of supply chain, production cycles got changed, disturbed, again adjusted. Then they have to revisit their target market customers. They have to revisit their segmental, the vertical product segments or horizontal, whatever it may be. So it all had its own impact on the overall business operations, overall functioning of the multinational enterprise globally. So how they operated during this financial year 2021 between them and with their customers, it has got huge impact on their financials, their profitability, their intercompany transactions, and naturally it all lead to their behavior towards their transfer pricing policies, methodologies which operated between the M&E group. So all we have to relate it with the TP methodologies or TP principles they have followed, or they have revisited, whatever they have done for the intercompany arrangement is our point of view from the CCD point of view, and again the TP documentation point of view. So let's get into that first. So all this happened globally and the India level also. Then OECD, which is the highest organization globally available for resolving these kind of issues which are faced worldwide level. So typically OECD member countries got their representations to the OECD that they have to give some kind of guidelines that how people should address these issues, which we have discussed in the last slide. So then typically OECD finally in December 2020 has come up with the 4-factor guidelines, I would say. These are the 4 important factors which OECD has highlighted, and they have suggested certain measures that that can be applied, that might be applied by the multinationals, depending on their country-specific guidelines, of course, because all the countries in the world are not the OECD member countries. Like India is also not a member country, so it may act as a guiding factor for them. But the countries who are the member countries of OECD can directly apply some of these principles as per the applicability or eligibility in their case, so that it will help in their TP documentation to justify or substantiate their transactions, their methodologies which they operated during FY 2021. So let's go briefly into these factors. These 4 factors were: first was the comparability analysis, second was losses and allocation of COVID-19 specific costs, third was the government assistance, and fourth was the advanced pricing agreement. Now, the comparability analysis is the crucial part of it, because various sectors in various industrial sectors globally has impacted or reacted in a different manner to the same COVID situation. As we could see, various industries has got a mixed impact, some positive, some negative. So the financial information, how we could apply the financial information in our comparability analysis, though it may be of a tested party or it may be of a comparable in case. How the traditional methods we have been using in the past years can be similarly applied for the current year analysis in the same way, or we need to change it a little bit by application of more than one method in case, or whether we can do that, whether it is useful or not, whether the traditionally profit-making companies have suddenly turned into loss-making companies in case of a tested party, these are comparable. So then whether we need to change the existing set of comparables or we need to revisit the set of comparables, the data available for the comparables, whether it is single year available, whether we should resort to the traditional methodology of multiple year data, is somewhat important from the comparability analysis. And there, I will not get into the details of the suggestions that OECD has given, because OECD paper is available online. You can go through it in little later. I'll just highlight those aspects which are important from our point of view. So the next aspect was the losses and allocation of COVID-19 costs. This again becomes crucial because due to this pandemic specific situation, there are very costs which has not been incurred by the taxpayers or the enterprises in the earlier years, because this was the special year. There has been a lot of migration of people from workplaces to their homes. The technology used again increased at a bigger pace. So there was these increase in cost due to such change in the operational mode of the enterprises. Some terms and applicability of terms and conditions in the intercompany arrangement. There has to be additional costs incurred by the entities. Or again, if the particular entity operating in a particular sector has got negatively impacted, then the losses situation was also there. So what to do with allocation of such costs between the M&E group, how the functional profiles of the M&E group got changed while operating during this FY 2021 situation, and how the losses need to be dealt with based on the changes in maybe the file profile, maybe the characterization of those entities in the same intercompany arrangement, is something which needs to be looked out into detail. Then the third aspect is government assistance program. It typically leads to look into whether any country specific, whether governments have announced certain measures, certain special guidelines, certain schemes, then how to give effect of such, maybe the discount schemes may be there, maybe the subvention schemes may be there. So such kind of schemes or such kind of receipts from the government assistance, how to apply it in the tested party, how to use it in the comparability analysis, what effect of it can be given. Because of such government assistance, whether the risk is getting transferred between this intercompany arrangement, risk is getting lower from one entity aspect are getting shifted to other entities. All these points become crucial for the comparability analysis and overall TP documentation perspective. And last but not the least is the advanced pricing agreement. The advanced pricing agreement is typically the agreement which has already been finalized with maybe unilaterally or bilaterally between the two governments or with the taxpayer with its own government. But what will happen after this FY 2021 impact to the existing agreement is very important to be looked into, because the functional or operational modes have been changed during this during facing this COVID scenario typically. So maybe the critical assumptions basis which these APAs were finalized earlier could have changed during this FY 2021 scenario, and then it is very important to revisit whether the assumptions has really got into the face the change, whether we need to revisit or renegotiate the APAs with the government, whether there is any need for such renegotiation. This is what is important to look into for the existing APAs. APAs under process, again the same analysis is necessary, and depending on the specific country specific guidelines or rules and regulations, the provisions will be applicable for the renegotiations, revisions or cancellation as the case may be. This has happened globally, and some countries like Singapore, Canada, Malaysia, Australia has their own come up with their own guidelines. Basis these guidelines were similar to the taking basis of the OECD guidelines. Some of the measures have been accommodated, some are not. Typically giving stress on the substantial TP documentation, the justification or substantiation for the procedures that have been followed by MNEs while facing typical these COVID-19 situations. Whatever the strategies have been followed, whatever the functional profiles have been changed, one needs to document it so as to get it justified before the tax authorities as the case may be. Coming back to India specific guidelines, Government of India has launched various schemes in various industrial sectors giving subventions or some kind of that. MCA has also relaxed and amended certain provisions. CBDT has also has been continuously pushing their deadlines, maybe related to compliance, assessment, appeals, everything, including RCCB deadlines as we have seen earlier. But no specific guidance from the government side has come on the TP matters as of date. Now comes the question is whether this specific guidance is really needed, like the OECD has highlighted, or not, or whether we can face the situations with the existing things. The answer is to some extent yes. It's not that we cannot face the situation without any specific new guideline coming into the picture. Without any new guideline, also what existing rules and regulations say, we can cope up with the situation. Of course, the factors necessary to look into are again the factors which are also highlighted by OECD, which are necessary for the comparability analysis and justification for the change in PAR profile, characterization of tested party and other involved entities. So Rule 10B in our typical income tax rule, which has the enabling provisions of application of methods, application of adjustments, and the related comparable data, what to do with and how to use it. Typically, it suggests that to eliminate the differences between the controlled transaction and the uncontrolled transaction, we can reasonably make the accurate adjustments that can be performed with the help of the available data, the statistics available for the tested party as well as the comparables. So nothing in Indian law prohibits a taxpayer to make such kind of adjustments. And we have been facing various judicial precedents also, wherein various kind of adjustments have already been accepted at various jurisdiction levels in India. So it's not that we have nothing with us and how we are in a completely blank situation what to do with. We have our rules and regulations with the help of which we can substantiate the position taken by us, taken by our associated enterprise with the help of the substantial documentation that we can maintain. With this, the typical issues that we are going to face are the use of contemporaneous data in the comparability analysis, loss environment where the company has suddenly turned into losses vis-a-vis the last year profitability situation. Then the use of single layer data versus multiple layer data becomes a crucial aspect, because I cannot compare my typical year situation with the multiple layer data of comparables wherein they might not have got the similar impact like mine. So whether I can resort to single layer data? Yes, we can, but then it is whether the data is available. So again, we did a last minute search on Provet yesterday where we could search for the data available typically for 2021 for various sectors. So we could only see that for financial year 2021, the data available for hotel industry was almost very low at the 13%. Pharma industry, it was somewhat near to 23%. Again, banking industry, nearly 40%. IT industry, again low up to 20%. And automobile industry, somewhat 25%. So again, the use of single layer data, whether it is feasible or not, as of date, the data available is little lower or the lower side. But yes, we already have the deadline extended till Jan 2022, sorry. So we can, as much as possible, we can collate data and whether we can correlate the possibility of using a single layer data of mine versus the comparable, whether it is appropriate or not, we can take that decision based on the conditions available. Then the adjustments to the tested party vis-a-vis comparables. Again, the rule 10B comes into picture where it has allowed us to make reasonable adjustment to the comparable thing. Whether I can do a similar adjustment to the tested party, again, some of the judicial precedents set the base for us that yes, we can do it. There are also controversial judicial precedents there for making adjustments in the tested party and the comparable thing. But then it was there in the past years also. It was not related to COVID specific year that the controversy comes into picture. So that was there in past and it will be there in present whenever there will be TP assessment. Again, TPO is not, generally not going to accept the stand you have taken on as is basis. You have to always give a justification substantially so that to present your stand. Again, there are some additional help available for us is ICAI guidance tool, which provides that in the financial statements which have got seriously impacted due to COVID-19 specific impact, they have to provide in the audited financial statement a specific note giving that specific impact. Maybe it was for the asset impairment of asset, fall in revenue, discounts, volume discounts, pricing change, whatever it may be. So such kind of notes can be helpful for us to make the specific impact for the tested party vis-a-vis comparable terms. Again, coming to the advanced pricing agreement, as I earlier said, due to the change in critical assumptions, we can always revisit and revise the negotiations with the government. Our existing rules allow us to do that. Revision is allowed under Rule 10Q. Even withdrawal is allowed under Rule 10G for the applications who are under process which have not been yet finalized. So it is not that cumbersome process which is there available in the law. It is somewhat good relief for us that these provisions are available and we can resort to it and make our life more easy. Special impact would be there on the limited risk entities which would be typically functioning, operating on a cost plus model, because though there is no direct impact on their revenue side or operational side of it, but there is an indirect impact they are going to face because the entrepreneur entities would be facing the loss situation, would be facing difficulties in striving through the COVID-19 specific situation. So in that case, there can be a reduction in remuneration model, revision of the remuneration model, or they might ask for exclusion of certain extraordinary costs arising due to this COVID-19 situation. And they may say that we will not recover, we will not reimburse with these costs with the markup. In that case, what to do is somewhat the positions we need to take with the discussions with the associated enterprises, typical documentation, specific arrangements need to be documented, the revision in agreements need to be documented properly, communicated properly, and then we can justify our position before the tax authority in future. So these are the typical issues which might be faced due to the COVID specific scenario. I'll hand it over again to Tejas to go into the intricacies of a TP documentation in more detail, not related to COVID specific, but in general as we do it for every year. Thank you.
Thanks, Meenal. I think if COVID had not really scared us so much, Meenal has scared us more with the analysis that we need to do with or the transfer pricing of COVID. just to quickly summarize what Meenal said is that it's going to COVID has impacted all of us. It's clear. Do that analysis for yourself, for your comparables, and for your tested party. Transfer pricing is all about business. It is about business acumen. So just do that analysis, see what all differences are there, and then make adjustments for that. That is what Meenal has explained in a very nice manner with the help of OECD guidelines and other countries guidance which is available. With that, quickly I'm coming back to the slide which we started off with, and I'll take maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes on this. I know I am extending my timeline in that sense, but these are certain errors which we have always seen in every year's transfer pricing documentation across clients and industries. So I'm just touching base on some of the key issues, may or may not be relevant for 2021, but yeah, in 2021, at least let's try to rectify these to the extent possible for our clients. I think one of the basic things in transfer pricing which all of us need to be aware is what is characterization. So characterization is the process of classifying the entities, stroke transactions depending on their functional analysis or functional profile. So you characterize a particular entity depending on their functional profile. So the basic characterizations are 3 types. You can see in the table. First is a manufacturer, distributor, or a service provider. And then within that, there are sub characterizations which are available. So example, whether he's a contract manufacturer or a toller, whether he's a normal licensed manufacturer or he's an entrepreneur. So I'll give you a simple example to so that you can understand what is the characterization. What is an entrepreneur? Infosys is an entrepreneur because they own the brand, they own the technology, let's say, they own the know-how, etc. The Indian brand Tata Motors, these are all entrepreneur entities in India. They own the brand, they own the know-how, they own the IP. They are the entrepreneur entities. What are licensed manufacturers? Licensed manufacturers are one step below the the entrepreneur entities. They don't own the brand, but they are using the brand to further the business in India. So any of the foreign companies operating in India primarily would fall under licensed manufacturing or licensed service provider, as the case may be. Like giving you example, let's say Pepsi, Coca-Cola, they have their own plants in India. If they are not working on a cost-plus basis, they are doing the normal business here, they would be licensed. And what is the license? They are using the brand, the technology of the foreign entity. That is the second thing. So that is a licensed manufacturer. And what is a contract manufacturer or a toller? Well, anybody who is doing business for one AE only 100%, they become a contract manufacturer. And if the material is also provided by AE, they become a toller. That is the difference between the various characterizations. And this term characterization is a bit important in the transfer pricing parlance because the arrow at the end of this slide, is very important. Greater the functions, assets, and risks, the more the return is what we have always learned in economics. Being commerce students, they have always learned that greater the functions, assets, and risks, the more the return. I'll change it or slightly modify because in transfer pricing or in the economic world, that doesn't really turn out in that manner. Greater the functions, assets, and risks, the more the return, yes, could be, but also the way it is, the more dynamic or the more fluctuating the return. So example, entrepreneur, like I take example of some of us who are consultants here, who have their own practice here. If you are a practicing CA, you are an entrepreneur. So depending on the COVID situation, if tomorrow the government just changes the deadline of the Form 3CBs and TP report from this year 22 to let's say 24, example 2 years, we may not have any business. So the entrepreneur may end up in losses. He may be taking more risks, he may be taking more assets, but he has a more fluctuating return. Vis-a-vis, example, the employees will still get their salary, could be with little bit of cut, but still they will get their salary. That's the way I look at it. So the answer is very simple, that more the functions, more the assets, more the risk. Answer is yes, more should be the return, but it is more dynamic or more fluctuating the return. And these are the various characterizations which are already on screen. The higher you are up on the table, the more fluctuating your returns could be. I'm moving to the next concept, which is linked with characterization, which is tested party. And I've seen a lot of companies falter with their transfer pricing methodology when they do this. So this is a very classic example I've taken. For sake of example, I've taken Patanjali here. Patanjali India is an entrepreneur. I would like to call it as an entrepreneur here. They own the brand. They are also a manufacturer here. They do the R&D of these products. For this example, I have taken a product which is Danta Kanti, which is their famous toothpaste. They have a subsidiary in US, whatever you call that. Let's say we call it the US Soap. It's a distributor of that product. They don't manufacture, they distribute that. And the way the transaction happens is the cost of manufacturing this Danta Kanti here in this table here is 100 rupees. We sell it to US Co at 100 rupees. 100 rupees US Co purchases and then sells it to the customers at 102 in their country. The US company is making a profit of 2 and I am making 0. What happens is we have to understand in this the concept of tested party. First, you characterize both the entities in the transaction. Characterize meaning classify. So Patanjali India is a brand owner, come manufacturer, come R&D activities also being done in India. The subsidiary company is only a distributor. They are simpler. That is the tested party. So whom you will test? Whether you will say that no, I don't have the data for the foreign company, I'll just test the Indian financials, but India is making losses. So can I just say that no, I have made losses, so I'll make a TP addition and then let's say Colgate has made a profit of let's say 10%, so I should add 10 back to India. The answer is definitely no. The answer is you have to trace the entire transaction to ultimately split it between the Indian part and the US part. Identify who is the employer and who is the employee. The example which I gave you of a consultant. Example, Tejas is the employer here. And who is the employee? So here, you will decide the salary of the employee, right? You will not decide the salary of the employer. The employer will get, the entrepreneur will get the balance return. You will fix the salary of the employee. So the distributor here is the employee. What you will benchmark is this 2% which is left in USA, whether it is an arm's length or not. And therefore, the tested party in this example is not India because you have the data for India, but it is the distributor entity. So the transaction, the concept of tested party is something which we a lot of companies always falter on. Just having the way you look at the concept of tested party is usually the tested party is the least complex entity for which reliable data is available and few adjustments are required. Either three have to be important, but yes, the lower you are in the characterization, that should be the entity which you should consider as a tested party for an analysis purpose. As I said that normally many companies misjudge this, consultants misjudge this aspect typically for three reasons. Availability of financial information of least complex party. Example, Patanjali India may not give the financials of Patanjali US. They may not want to share it. Secondly, the cost of foreign databases. So to benchmark that 2% of US, you need foreign databases and you cannot do it on Provence and Capitline here. You need those foreign databases which are a bit expensive to hire or to let's say take them on a SaaS basis. And then non-acceptance of broader concept by Indian courts. You know, the Indian courts have broadly ruled against the use of foreign comparables as tested party, foreign companies as tested party, and that is primarily because of lack of comparable data. So in India, you get the annual reports of comparable companies, therefore the courts are okay with it. But for foreign companies, you don't get the annual reports, and therefore the concept has been beaten time and again by the Indian court. I have just highlighted the rulings which are in favor or against. But remember, always in the transfer pricing analysis, you start with the characterization, then you move to the tested party, and you should choose the employer as a tested party. The answer is no. You should choose the employee as a tested party. That is, in a transaction, identify who is the entrepreneur and who is the employee, and always take the employee as a tested party. I am moving to the next important thing because in the Form 3CB, you cannot go ahead. Infosys also right now is not able to determine the most appropriate method in the Form 3CB. Whenever you import the CSV file, even Infosys says that I will not give you that most appropriate method. You have to select it on your own. So right now, most appropriate method is the most important aspect when it comes to filing the Form 3CB. These are the 6 methods broadly available globally. There are 5. India, we have the 6th method. The first method is comparable uncontrolled price method, which is always dealing at a price level, that is at a turnover level. So anything which is to do with turnover cost, it could be even purchase cost for that matter, that becomes a comparable uncontrolled price. The practically, it's low practical applicability because you need very stringent conditions for comparability purposes. So you have to compare apples with apples, not with any other form. Then the next methods are resale price and cost plus method, where you compare the gross profit from the transaction for the respective transaction. Again, the methodology is medium practicable. You normally use RPM for distributors. There is a problem here is how to define gross margin. But what happens is you can either define it on your own, that what is the gross margin, and proceed, or take some guidance from the existing case law. Then the balance method of TNMM, which is the most widely used. I call it the Satta method. A lot of companies in India use TNMM because they don't have any other information with them. But then you are left with the mercy of God that your client makes a profit and then you are at arm's length. And then if you don't make profit, then you resort to various kind of economic adjustments. So logically, TNMM method should be used in certain specific, but yes, in India we are using it for most of our clients where the profits are decent in size. Profit split method rarely used because it involves a transaction where you're splitting the transaction between two entities. Example, let's say Samsung India is also doing certain R&D and Samsung Korea is also doing certain development of products. In that case, if the IP is split between two products, then two countries or two AE, then you will use the profit split method. Very rarely used from a transfer pricing perspective. And other method, जिसका कोई नहीं होता, उसका other method होता है. That I should not be saying that, but that is the practical way things have been doing ahead in India. A lot of times in business, things are not always in black and white. A lot of times they fall into the shades of gray. And if the shades of gray don't match with any of the 5 methods mentioned above, you will use other method as the most appropriate method. Of course, the logic needs to be analyzed and documented in the transfer pricing study as well as in the form. This slide will help you, give you perspective about which method is normally used for which transaction. So loans, royalties, service fee, you will see that CUP has been selected as the most appropriate method. RPM, by the nature itself, has to be used for the distributors, where you have the gross margin available. CPM, semi-finished goods which have been exported. TSM, as I said, use of intangible. TNMM, widely used. You will see majority of the companies use TNMM where the profits are good. Another method, typically if you have got some kind of a valuer certificate or chartered engineer certificate, then you will use the other method to justify such transactions. I think the last topic which I would want to discuss is on comparability adjustment. So what happens is you have got 2 transactions. You have your tested party. For the moment, let's assume we have an Indian entity which is a tested party, and then you have certain comparables. So giving you an example, I have, let's say my company for the moment is Infosys. Infosys is my client, and whether for Infosys I can say Wipro is a comparable. Well, both of them are entrepreneurs. So answer is definitely no. I cannot compare the profitability of Infosys with the profitability of Wipro because both are entrepreneurs. Nonetheless, in this situation, you will have to go to the tested party, and normally you will benchmark the foreign entity in such situations. So I'll now change the example from Infosys to somebody different. Let's say in Pune, we have a lot of IT companies who are working on a cost plus basis. So in all these companies who are working on a cost plus basis, who should be the comparable? For these companies, whether Infosys is ideal or whether, let's say, Cinecron, or I don't know, there are so many other companies in Pune who are IT companies are ideal. That's a question which we need to understand. So what happens is there are differences between the 2 transactions. So Apple cannot be compared with only Apple, but you will your comparables will be oranges, there will be pineapples, etc. when you look at comparables. So for a company who is working on a cost plus basis, possibly you may have Infosys, possibly you may have R System, possibly you may have other companies who are not owning brands, but their primary indicators are that they are broad comparable, let's say functionally. Both are providing IT companies. In such situations, you need to do some kind of adjustment. If you can do an adjustment, then it becomes a comparable. If you cannot do an adjustment, so example, Wipro and Infosys cannot be done. You cannot do any adjustments for these 2. I will not get into all these type of adjustments. For the sake of example, I've taken 2 major adjustments which are normally done, which is working capital and capacity. I will explain you by way of an example how does this working capital adjustment work. I hope you can see the screen. By way of an example, what is the issue with working capital adjustment? So, there are three options which I have given you, option 1, 2, and 3. Option 1, is that the sale value remains the same in all the three options. The operating cost remains the same in three options. But what happens is in option 1, I am giving a credit period of 90 days, I am giving 200 days and 365 days credit period. What happens is in transfer pricing, we use operating profit, and operating profit is defined as sales minus operating cost. In all the three options, it remains the same. But what happens is the interest cost, which is calculated in this example at 10%, for the 90 days is around 2.47, and I have calculated on the sales for the sake of simplicity. On option 2, it is 5.4, and in option 3, it is 10 rupees. Now, the PBT in all the three examples is different. What this means is that the operating profit upon sales is same for all the three situations, but my PBT on sales, that is the profit before tax and sales, is very different in all the three options. As a businessman, this will never happen. So example, let's say when many of us are consultants here. So if a client comes and says that I am going to pay you the money after 1 year, naturally you will not quote him the same fee. You will quote him with the interest cost or adding some other cost to the whole thing. So this extra cost which has been incurred of interest, you will charge it to the client, and that is what we have explained you in option 2, in this table here, that I have adjusted the profitability of the sales for working capital. You will see in all these three examples, what happens is the sale value will change. Normally, as you increase the credit period, your sale price will change in all the three options. 90 days it was 100. 200 days, I will load the difference between 5.48 and 2.48. In 365 days, I will load the difference between 10 rupees and 2.47. That is 107.3. The cost remains the same, and then I have an operating profit which is increasing. What happens is the operating profit will show an increasing trend, but your PBT will more or less remain same. If you look at a actual level, that is the price level, it is same. This is the whole concept of working capital adjustment. The assumption in a working capital adjustment is that your costs remain the same. Your sale price or your cost will reduce depending on your working capital cycle, and therefore it has an impact on your interest cost, having an impact on your profitability and transaction value. Therefore, you do something known as a working capital adjustment. The same thing is explained here in verbatim. This is something which is widely accepted by the Indian tax authority from a transfer pricing perspective. The second adjustment I would like to quickly take you through is capacity adjustment. These two are both, so working capital and capacity is important from this year, again from a COVID perspective. COVID will have impact on your financials, it will have an impact on your working capital cycle, it will have an impact on your capacity utilization. So please remember that this is a bit of an important thing. Capacity adjustment, by the name itself, suggests that it is a change of capacity. Every company has an installed capacity. If you are operating at an optimum capacity, you will make profit. I have again taken a simple example for this. Let me just run you from that example. You have option 1, which is the normal situation capacity, where the company is operating at 100% capacity. The sale value is 100, 80 in option 2, and option 3 it is only 20. So what it means, here it is operating at 100% capacity, here it is operating at 80, and here it is operating at 20. The variable cost, more likely than not, will change in the ratio of the sale value, but the fixed cost will remain the same for any business. Normally that is the case. There could be some semi-variable cost, but I am keeping it simple for this example purpose. The operating cost has been calculated. So you will see in a 100% capacity, I would have made 20% OP by sales and GP would have been at 50%. Now the transaction here, for the moment, let's assume I am doing a transaction of sale. So my sale is to the AE at 100 rupees. So 50 is my cost and I'm selling it at 100 rupees. So 20 in TNMM situation, I would have been okay. But what happens in option 2, if my capacity slips to 80%, the transaction remains the same because I will still sell at 80 rupees. My cost will be same, my GP will be same 50% as it was in option 1, but my operating profit has gone down 12%. Option 3, if I have gone down to 20% capacity, it further deteriorates because my fixed cost will remain the same, operating profits will change, and I will be at loss at the operating level, but at the gross profit I will be making still profit. So these option 1, 2, and 3 is just to signify or to tell you how does the capacity work. So the lower the capacity, the chances are that your fixed costs are not getting absorbed appropriately, and therefore you will end up making losses. And therefore the adjustment is done to the fixed cost, so that the fixed costs also are reflective of the capacity adjustment where you are at. In this example which I taken, maybe this fixed cost, I will multiply this into, let's say, 20%. So then maybe again I'll come back into operating profit of 30%. But this is a very, very poor way of doing things. There is a scientific way of doing it. But yes, you will adjust the fixed cost is what I wanted to bring up to feed on for everybody. Again, usually accepted when the adjustment is done to the margin of comparable. Normally, it is not accepted when you do it to the tested part. I think there are two more adjustments: depreciation adjustment, which is a variant of capacity adjustment. It is triggered when you have got changes in depreciation policy. So, example, my tested party is depreciating assets. Let's say, example, a laptop at 100% because every year they need to replace their laptops because of the technology intensive nature. But my comparables are using 60% laptop policy. So there is going to be a change in depreciation rates for both of them, and therefore you will make a adjustment to the operating profit in this situation. This qualifies as a depreciation adjustment. One of the ways of looking at it is, can we also look at cash PLI profit, that is PBDIT, PB profit before depreciation, interest, tax, and amortization. That is what you can use for the purposes of doing a depreciation adjustment. That is also one way of looking at it. Not usually accepted by tax authorities widely. However, courts have been allowing these adjustments in the past. And the last point is on foreign exchange adjustment. I am using this because COVID has caused us again a lot of fluctuations in forex in the past year. So assuming I was buying an item from my AE last year at $100, even this year I'm buying at $100, but last year the dollar was 70, this year it is 75. My cost is going to increase by 5 rupees or 5, I don't know what you call it, 5 rupees to a dollar, whereas my purchase price has remained the same. So AE is still selling to me at cost plus 5, which is $100, but my cost has increased in my books. There is a way of doing the forex adjustment, but it is a bit of a time-consuming product. What you need to identify in your tested parties is whether your AE is a import-intensive or export-intensive business, and whether the forex has actually caused disruption in your business. Then you can make an addition, make an adjustment towards that. This is the last slide which I have. While filing the Form 60, keep a tab for unreported transactions, free of cost goods received, public given, royalty is not charged. Typically in inbound situation, you will see that they have agreed into a trademark or a license agreement, but they have not charged royalty. You need to report that in clause 12. Free of cost guarantee provided. I explained it while discussing clause 15. Interest-free loans that have been provided by Indian companies to companies outside India are rampant in outbound situations. You need to even disclose these transactions in the form. Another thing which I have always seen is check for residential status of director who also qualifies AE. So in your RPT schedule, you will see that the most neglected people are the directors or individuals. They could be your AE based on the definition in section 92A. And if they are non-residents, then you need to report them also in the form CCV. Just check for those transactions as well. In case of qualifications, in case the space provided in the online form CCV is not sufficient, then one can even file a physical notes of annexures can be prepared, and then they have to be signed by the client as well as the CA and filed with the jurisdictional AO within 15 days of the filing of form CCV. Right now, they have provided abundant space in the form CCV, but nonetheless, I have seen a lot of times the number of words or characters can be very significant. In that case, you can do physical filing. I think that was a quick session on key aspects for transfer pricing for financial year 2021.
I had just one question. Meenal had discussed about comparability, and just one point which I want clarification is, 10B gives you how comparable companies, especially for these external searches. So you look at the comparable company or the company whether it's carrying out the same or similar activity during the current year. If you don't have current year data, you are allowed to see 1 year back. Now that is all discussed in 10B. And once you select a comparable based on current year, or if current year is not there, the previous year data, 10CA tells you once a company is selected, you take a weighted average for 3 years. So you don't have an option to really, while carrying out the weighted average for 3 years, you don't have an option then to see, whether the first 2 years because of COVID are comparable or not. So what is your view on that? So
You are right, Sunil. This is the way I look at it is that the Indian law, once you select a particular company as comparable and you are using weighted average as in for the purpose of calculation, there are going to be industries here where you would want to select only single year data. Now I think here we will have to make an exception to the rule and say that this year is a COVID year and we cannot just follow the rules blindly. So the way, if you ask me, you can use multiple year data or past 2 years data where it has impacted the overall transaction of the assessee. At least that's the way it used to read earlier. I know the current rules read it a bit differently, but I will have to, in the study report, I'll have to say that the current year there has been a significant drop in the industry-wide profitability. I will borrow my conviction from the industry analysis, where in the industry analysis I have to demonstrate that for my entire industry, there has been a significant drop in the industry. Like giving you an example, we have one of our clients who is in the hotel industry. We are seeing that for hotel industry, everybody there is a significant drop in the profitability. So we have put that table in the industry overview, highlighting that this is one of the reasons why I cannot use multiple year data and I have to use single year data. And basis that we are using that for the purpose of searches in the current year. Also, what we have mentioned in the transfer pricing study report is that we are reserving that right now we have got data for only 20% of the companies who are there as classified as hotel and industry. So we will want to use reserve our right to use data subsequently when the same gets updated. Anyway, the transfer pricing officer will do that. But what is going to be a unique thing, Sunil, is that when we do the assessment for transfer pricing for financial year 2021, there will be situations where the assessee will want to use single year data and the TPO may want to use multiple year data because it may be in his favor. That could be a situation, and where he will be technically right law perspective. So that is the reason why when Meenal said that whether any guidance is required, well, some guidance or some kind of at least some kind of indication or some kind of tweak the law should have been provided, which can help us either select single year data for the purpose of comparability, or vice versa. Let's say for the purpose of assessee also you do term testing. For the assessee also you use multiple year data. But both of them will not be accepted by the tax authority. So this is something which only time will tell you.
correct. So just one comment from my side. I think the industries where you have reflected that based on the present data that IT, ITES and pharma and drugs, they have done extremely well in this year. So unfortunately, what happens when you have associated enterprise transactions, when you have subsidiaries here, mostly their profitability has been controlled by the group, even in the COVID year. But when this 2021 will be available for comparables, I think we have seen on stock exchanges, most of the listed companies have made bumper profits this year because they have saved on overheads. So use of single year data may also be risky for such good industries.
I agree. So use of single year, that is what happens is that from a transfer pricing perspective, we will have to be very clear about first starting with your tested party, what impact it has. If it has not had any impact for you, just example, whether positive or negative, then possibly you will continue with the same methodology. But if there is any kind of negative or positive impact, then you will have to possibly alter your transfer pricing methodology for this year. To like giving you example, as you rightly said, pharma industries have been making a bumper profit in the current year. Even in these situations, then whether if I was working on a cost plus basis of the earlier year with a cost plus 10, I logically should have been working with the cost plus 12, let's say, for the current year because of the bumper year. But then you should use single year profit, then at least there will be some kind of sanctity in your overall approach from a transfer pricing. can see an email ID which will come in the PPT. If you have any issues in the Form 3CB filing, you can just send a mail to this email ID with your issue, and they will resolve. Normally, I've seen that they will respond to you in some time. At least it will get noted. So, example, Sunil or somebody, if you are facing issue in clause 14, this e-filing web manager is what they had shared, the Infosys team had shared with us. If you have any issue, you just send out a mail with the snapshot, screenshot, so that they can understand that this is the problem which they are facing. And then normally I've seen that smaller issues get resolved quickly, larger ones take time, but this email ID is very useful. So you can use this email ID for the purpose of your transfer pricing, noting your issues on the Form 3CB issue filing.
Tejas, did you get answers to queries raised?
Yeah,
from your login?
Yeah, I've got for 3 or 4 of them. I got one yesterday, you know, the one the one which you can see on the screen, the second bullet in the post uploading error, they have resolved it yesterday. The address of the CA to reflect. I got a answer. So what they do is they create a grievance in your name with that email ID, and then they resolve it, and then you get it from as a grievance resolving method.